By my clock, it's 7:04. I still see a few people joining, but that'll continue. My name is Ed Cross. You might recognize the yellow shirt. I've been at all the tryout sessions so far. Normally, we get a chance to talk to parents and others at the fields during tryouts. It's a great chance to ask about the club and what's going on. Since we're limited in our ability to do that this year, welcome. This is a chance to do that. We're going to cover some ground with a quick presentation to sort of handle some of the overall, the kind of frequently asked questions about schedule and team layout and things like that. That should take about 10 or 15 minutes. Josh Cockstein, our technical director, is on the call. He'll be monitoring the chat, and that's usually the best place to jump in Zoom and set up send in a question or put something out. After we go through a bit of the presentation and cover a lot of the basic ground, we will open it up for people to jump in and chat. Some simple rules. Please mute yourself when applicable. Unmute yourself when we get to the point where we can do some question and answers. We will not be able, of course, to talk about particular players or even particular teams. Our tryouts this year were extended because we knew it was going to be a complex year. We knew there were going to be a lot of conflicts. As of today, we finished 3 tryout sessions in all the early age groups. That's normally what we host, but we have Saturday and Sunday at San Rafael High, those West Fields, for 2 more sessions for players who haven't made it yet, and for players to give it a go and show their best. No teams are set yet. Coaches are working on how the numbers are looking and what the arrangements are like, and we'll go into more detail on that as we look at the schedule. But it is wide open. Everything is a blank slate. So we will conclude on Sunday. But let me make sure everybody's in, and I will share my screen. I can remember how to do that. Okay, I'll trust that everybody can see this. The quirks of Zoom are that I go a little bit blind when we're running a presentation. So without too much more, we'll go through a quick little layout here. Our agenda you'll see on the left side of your screen. Very simple. We'll talk about the schedule ahead, go into a few of the frequently asked questions, and then open up for Q&A. So what's ahead? May 22nd and 23rd are our last sessions, Saturday and Sunday. Monday is our coach work day. This is when they go through and coordinate in the age groups, sort all the sort of what they've seen and what the layout of the land will be like, what the teams will be like. And then they will have to report to the DOCs and the technical director in order to finalize rosters for posting. This will occur on Tuesday. We specifically do not do it during the day. We wait till the end of the day to make sure we don't make any errors, and also that nothing comes out when players might be in school or things like that. It will be posted at marinfc.com. I'll explain that in a moment. If your player is offered a spot, the deadline to register, there'll be a TeamSnap link on the website right on the roster that you can click, and we're asking that people register by June 1 for the next season. Processing all those registrations and making sure everything is correct and assigning them to teams in TeamSnap, which is where the communications and scheduling and everything else occurs at Marin FC, will take approximately 2 weeks. It is not an automatic process. So when you register, there will be a period of time that we'll go through and make sure everything's correct and we have everything, birth certificates and registrations with US Club, all kinds of things have to happen. But usually we're pretty quick about it, but we do take those 2 weeks after tryouts are over and rosters are posted and registrations are taken to get that up and running. On the website, the way this will work is there's a teams menu, and you'll see boys team coaches and girls team coaches in that menu. Those will convert on Tuesday to boys teams and girls teams. And you'll see then down, as you scroll down the page, below each coach position under each team, we'll be listing the roster. So that's where you'll find the posting on Tuesday. After that, a lot of questions come up about, what happens next? Well, in June, some trainings will definitely start. We've been thrown off a little bit by delays this year in terms of the tryout window, high school soccer, a bunch of other things. But commonly our teams are back and anxious to get started. So some trainings will occur in June. July 4th is Independence Day. It's observed on the 5th. So July 6th, if there is to be a break for teams, it will definitely occur in the lead up to that holiday. And then after that holiday, our red and blue teams are definitely going to resume trainings and getting prepared for competition. And many of our steel and titanium teams will be also, just because they'd like to do that. It is up to each team to set their schedule, working with their manager and their coach to see what suits best in terms of any conflicts that might exist or when they really want to get going. By August, everybody will be back. Minimum 2 trainings a week, commonly 3 up to 4, and hopefully everything will be much more normal at that point in terms of field availability after all these close downs and shutdowns for COVID and that type of thing. As I said, during that time, everybody will get assigned to Team Snap, and that's where all the scheduling and all the communications will occur at the team level. Club communications, we try to keep to a minimum. We don't like to crowd people's inboxes. So teams essentially get launched and will start to work on their own through our field scheduler and our referee coordinator and communicate to each other through the Team Snap interface. So if we go into the #1 most frequently asked question, and this is kind of the thing that really helps us cover a lot of the ground at Marin FC, and the questions that people ask as they're coming to the club and going through tryouts is, what makes Marin FC different? It's a deceptively simple question, and there are a lot of answers to it. The first one that's easy to talk about is the level of play. So our blue teams in the U13 to U19 age groups play in the ECNL. Our red teams in the U13 and U19 age groups play in what we call the ECRL, or the ECNL Regional League. This is in development on the boys' side. It's already in existence on the girls' side. This seems to be a sort of subset to the ECNL, but it's actually developing in really robust ways. For example, ECNL announced last year, but couldn't enact them because of COVID shutdown, that they were going to start hosting ECRL showcases. So the same type of thing that the ECNL teams play in for college exposure and robust competition that would be hosted around the country. Commonly, the ECRL has done a few of these kind of sub-showcase type things in the lead up in the younger age groups, and they'll do them in Davis, which is a great venue that brings most of California together for those types of events. So our red teams see a lot of that elevated play. Our steel and titanium teams and some of our red teams, depending on placement and challenge level and development level, would then find themselves in either the NPL or NorCal Premier. And this is something a lot of people are familiar with in terms of the NPL, the National Premier League, having a champions, an NPL 1 and an NPL 2 division, and then in NorCal Premier, gold, silver, and bronze. The big difference about this structure is that for the majority of clubs in the area, it's limited to NorCal, gold, silver, and bronze. So Marin FC, through player pathway and player development and team advancement, moves our players up to these higher levels of play, higher level of exposure, NPL showcase, and state cup competition, and ultimately into the ECNL in the older age groups. So to go through the more complex answer about what makes Marin FC different, we're very proud of the fact that we've built an entire club. We start very young and have developed a complete player pathway. So as they develop through us, they can start in a particular level, and some may bloom late. And the ability to play on, say, a steel team and then rise to a red or even a blue team is all contained within the club. So developing the love of the game at an early age really benefits the fact that we've created a home for these players. We were recognized as one of the very first clubs in the country to be designated a players first club for exactly these reasons, that sort of player support, building an entire club structure around what players need and what they expect to take away from a quality club that advances their players to college and even professional levels. Part of this is all the leagues that we play in. We host the WPSL, an adult women's team. which is, if you're not familiar with the WPSL, it's actually the largest women's league in the world, with about 130 clubs around the United States competing every summer towards a national champion. This is a terrific outlet for our older girls players as they develop through our program. Many go on to play in college and often come back and play during the summer with our current players on our WPSL, the Marin FC Siren team. So it's a real great opportunity for that extra challenge as you develop and grow with the club. As I mentioned, we are an NPL designated club. That means that our teams are automatically placed in the NPL when they want that particular level of competition. This is unique in the area and sets the stage for high level competition and training for our wide swath of teams. College recruiting and placement is very robust. Over 500 players at Marin FC have gone on to play at colleges all around the country at all kinds of levels, Division I, Division III. A lot of players even go on to play club soccer at colleges around the country. Some have even won club championships and Division III championships and things like that. We've had a couple players go on and even play in the NCAA national championship. We have a huge goalkeeper program with several trainers and dedicated field space and times. This is where we pluck the goalkeepers out of their normal team trainings and get them into specialized trainings where they are focused solely on goalkeeping. This was one that we put together in terms of a new family that came and just said that it's been magical. I think it speaks to the idea that as you enter the club, there is a great breadth and width to what happens at Marin FC and how players develop here. It's sort of strange that a lot of people's familiarity with soccer is, well, you join a team and you play and that's about it. Not at Marin FC. You join a team, you'll play with other teams, you'll train with other teams, you'll scrimmage with other teams, you'll guest play. Player movement between teams is facilitated by the fact that everybody's under one umbrella. And so the ability for a player to rise and get extra challenge by moving around from one team to another is a very big deal and really, really helps us target the right kind of challenge and the right kind of development for every player. A big initiative this year is we've partnered with the Tovo Institute in Barcelona to further develop that overall club methodology so that as players go through, they are exposed to the same terminology, the same challenges, the same patterns of thinking and modality, so that when they move, say, from one team to another or from one age group to another, it is not a reset. It is a continuation and a long-term development. This was kicked off this year. It's a multi-year program to develop and deploy this across all teams in the club. Travel with us is really an exciting thing. You know, if you ask alumni from Marin FC what they remember most, they will always bring up some of the trips that they go on. In the West, commonly we're in Phoenix and Vegas and Surf Cup in LA, Silver Lakes. But through the ECNL and the required showcases that we're slated to go through, we will compete all up and down the East Coast from Florida to New York City. Another major foundational piece that makes Marin FC different is our financial aid program. Every year we allocate in our budget about $250,000. This year we have upped that to $300,000 because we know that there's going to be economic need coming out of the pandemic. But it's not a matter of just sort of picking up the tab on fees. Every financial aid player is provided their uniform kit. This is on a 2-year cycle. So not every year, but when they're new or every 2 years, we buy them their uniforms. And we also have a very robust travel grant program because we know that although you might be able to enjoy and play club soccer at reduced fees because of financial aid, when it comes time to get on a plane and fly somewhere, those can be pretty expensive. And so we look carefully at what a player's need will be, and we work with them to cover an appropriate percentage of their airfare. So if a player is, say, a 75% aid player, we will pay for 75% of their airfare to events, required events outside of the state of California. We have a special partnership with the Oakland Roots, and in the same way that the WPSL offers advanced play for our growing and developing young women in our club as they get to the U19 and college level. The Oakland Roots reached out to us and said, we would very much like to partner with you on a similar track. That is to have their coaches come and work with our boys teams and our older players, and also to have our players go and guest play with them in a call-up type fashion where they will get a chance to train with the Oakland Roots, and potentially, depending on sort of tryout scenario, they would be able to go and play with the Oakland Roots. Our coaching is robust. We have over 40 licensed coaches. We have the top licensure in Northern California for many years running, with 6 or 7, I believe, A licensed coaches with us. We have European license holders. And this past year during the pandemic, we developed an entire new program to bring in our alumni to act as assistant coaches. And we're looking at ways that we're going to expand on that going into what will be sort of more of a normal season. Our hope would be that through our alumni, through our graduates, they will be able to come back and be assistant coaches, and that will give greater contact to players as they develop through the program, and they get to see mentors and young players like themselves who've gone on to play at high levels. We have a huge sponsorship program with multiple sponsors. Fairview Capital is our title sponsor, but we also enjoy support from Nike, Gatorade, and Bank of Marin, and a very special partnership with UCSF Health Sports Medicine. They not only sponsor us, but they provide our athletic trainers and are a huge resource for us in terms of when injuries occur. We have immediate access to the best support mechanisms when people reach out and ask for it. Fields and equipment is a huge thing. We've just gone through this because we're headed into the new season. Every year we equip every single coach with a complete kit, all the material they need. We just spent about $30,000 on that this year to make sure that all our players have, super quality equipment through their coaches. And the fields are unsurpassed in terms of the quality of the artificial turf fields that we have through Dominican College, through San Rafael High, through Marin Academy, College of Marin, Redwood High School. The list is quite large in terms of what's going on there. And I can also say that we're in the middle of a robust effort to develop one of 4 possible facilities of our own, one of which is a long-term prospect and one of which is likely to occur within the next year, which would bring on board potentially indoor facilities for the winter months, and additional private fields that we would have strict control over. So we're very excited about that part. And lastly, a couple of the big things. The ECNL is an extraordinary league, and we're really proud to be a part of it. They are developing the best exposure showcase and product across the board in terms of also the regional league. So for both the boys and the girls, the exposure is fantastic. The competition is fantastic. The tournaments and showcases they put on are tremendous. And the league play, if you look at the top clubs in the area in terms of who we're going to play, the ECNL is the place to be. So the last slide I have here are some critical links. We've documented a lot of this, and there's a lot to go through on the website. I am recording this, so I'll leave it up here and people can go back if they want and look through it. But on our website, everything under marinfc.com/something is a chance to learn more about all these things. There's a player first page about what that program is about. There's actually an entire 45-minute video presentation that we normally give in our parent meetings prior to tryouts, but due to COVID, we recorded it last year. Some of it's a little bit outdated, but it does cover a wealth of information. There is a page specifically set aside to describe the fees. I will point out that Marin FC is a nonprofit, and our fees only align with what the actual costs are. We have a fee collection system where we collect in order to make sure all the teams are funded and they can pay for all their expenses. But at the end of the year, we do what's called a closeout and a reconciliation. And when there's fees that are collected that went unused, those fees are refunded to the players. I encourage you to look at our financial aid page. On there, there's a financial aid calculator. So if you think you might be in a position to need financial aid, you can go in there and select your annual income level, and it will adjust and show you what your fees are likely to be for the year. We do go through a very complex process of making sure the entire budget that is set aside, all the funds are equitably distributed. This is a blind-based system. It does not allocate more to boys or girls or blue teams or red teams or anything. It is all based on need. So if you receive an offer to join a team with us at any level and you need financial aid, you can go and look at the aid calculator and see exactly where you might fit in and what your fees would be like for the year. At that page, there are also downloadable forms in English and Spanish. And there is also this year an online application button. So you can go and click online. All you have to do is fill out the questions and be prepared to upload photographs of your income verification documents, which should speed the process along greatly in terms of not having to bundle it together and drop it off or mail it in. There are areas for description of our team profiles, what their schedule is like. You can learn more about our goalkeeping program. All our coaches are outlined there. And then our ECNL for boys and girls pages are there too. There's many others, but it's the starting point to learn whatever you need to learn by visiting the website. So with that, I will jump out of this. And actually, I think what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Josh, because Josh is the best at telling everybody what Evan forgot to say. So Josh.
Very kind of you, Evan. However, I have to say, I don't know if you missed anything that I can think of. Yeah, I will say that you also find the links to the DOCs and their emails. We have a technical staff comprised of 6 directors of coaching, 3 on the boys side, 3 on the girls side, split up by age groups. We also have a director of ECNL for the boys, a director for ECNL for the girls, and then a director of goalkeeping. So a lot of the questions you may have may be best addressed for the director of coaching within the age group of your child, if that makes sense. Okay. Evan, we haven't had any questions in the chat so far, so if you want to open it up.
Well, Tyler Holden has, okay, so I'm new, has raised his hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself and.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much for having this. I just had a question around the schedule. We have kind of a packed July, and it looks like the date for when you start is moving up sooner to the December starting. I'm wondering, how firm is the July 6th date, and how flexible will you be with missing practices in July? It sounds like August is definitely like a need to be, but is July flexible at all?
Evan, can I take that one?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so a few things on that, because we do get questions every single year from new families asking about the schedule, commitment level, etc. You know, I first want to point out that we do have kids in our club of roughly 1,000 kids. We have so many kids that are multi-sport athletes. So if there are those that are potentially doing more than just soccer, I would say those are great questions for the coaches, but do know that this is one that comes up regularly. And specific to Tylee's question, again, it will vary depending on the team that your son or daughter plays for. I wouldn't worry about that too much until you get an offer, and then you can directly reach out to that coach. Many of our teams that are going to the Surf Cup, which is an event down in San Diego, which takes place in late July, those teams for sure will start up the week of July 5th. But those are our blue teams more often than not from, I would say, U13 and up. So for the silver, steel, titanium, more often than not, those teams will start to filter back in through July, and the younger age groups will actually begin into July and early August.
And I'd add to that you know, this comes up frequently, and we're actually fine with conflicts. We know conflicts happen, and we know kids are dedicated and other things are going on in their life. What we ask is for forthrightness, meaning that if you have a conflict, let your coach know. It's not that we're going to judge it or anything. It's more that a coach would really need to know so they can effectively plan a reasonable training session. If there's going to be a few kids missing, you know, he might want to plan it, or she might want to plan it differently based upon that knowledge. So it is incredibly helpful to know that in advance. Dylan, hand up.
Yep. Thanks, Evan. Very informative, so appreciate it. As it relates to player development and specifically kind of the club's coaching philosophy and kind of I guess just not knowing any of the coaches' qualifications for coaches. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the first thing I point out is the coach bios on the website. So you can go, and if you look at the team listings, all the coaches' bios are linked there. So if you're looking at the age group and potential teams that you should always be able to link and find out more about every coach. But Josh, do you want to go into a little bit more detail on the methodology?
Sure, I'd love to. So first and foremost, Dylan, thanks for your question. As Evan said, you could find a lot of information in the bios. However, you will come to find that we have more coaches on our staff that have coached collegiately or are currently coaching collegiately, have coached in the Olympic development program. Those of you that don't know what that entails, it's a process in which our youth national team players are often used to be identified to make that next step. Coaches that have coached professionally, played professionally, etc. However, that all said, when we hire coaches, we definitely canvas, a great area looking for coaches that fit specific qualities that we're looking for. And first and foremost above them is to use the game as a vehicle to teach life lessons. And we firmly believe that. And that said, of course, the thing that unites us all is the passion for this particular game. And we first and foremost see ourselves as educators. And we really do believe in a certain style of play. So you're not going to see us out there playing kickball and just knocking the ball down the field and hoping for big, strong, fast athletes to chase after it. We do really try to develop kids that have technical proficiency, but first and foremost have the cognitive ability to read the game in real time and make good decisions and then be able to execute. And as Evan spoke to earlier in our presentation, we this year are bringing Tovo, which is headed up by Todd Bean, and they're out of Barcelona. And the reason why we handpicked them specifically was because it was the best fit for what we were looking for. Their style of play, their principles of play were mostly in line with ours, which is based on possession, technical proficiency, and possession play with the intention of pulling the opposition apart to create seams and exploit space. So maybe over some people's head, but pretty simple stuff, which the kids certainly will understand as they get older. Did that help?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you wouldn't mind just kind of touching on if the kids do not make the team that we had kind of originally tried out for, is there any opportunity to speak with the evaluators or coaches on what they need to work on specifically as it relates to where there were kind of deficiencies or need for improvement in the tryout?
Yeah, that's a great question. We always encourage folks to feel free to, again, reach out to the coaches. All of our email addresses are on our website, and you can absolutely ask for feedback. At the end of the day, we can't accommodate every single kid. We currently have roughly 1,000, and I think we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,300 to 1,400 kids that are registered for tryouts. So while we'd like to be able to take every player that comes out, it's just not possible. But we certainly want to see every kid continue on the sport and continue their development path. And the reality is, and we've actually charted it over time, the number of kids that go on to be fantastic players, even potentially collegiate players, that at the younger age groups were on second, third, and fourth teams, and in some cases weren't even selected for a team. It's a pretty large number, to be honest. And it just goes to show that kids develop at different rates, which is totally understandable.
So I'm going to jump into the chat that's filling up, and I don't want to miss out on some things. One quick question is, what does a typical soccer year or season look like, meaning start and end date? This depends on the team. Our steel and titanium teams are programmed to be partial year teams. That means they start in midsummer or August, and they will finish in November. Maybe if there's a state cup run that goes a little bit further, they might spill into the spring. All those teams have the option as a group to extend their season and adopt a full year calendar. And this year, most of our teams, I think all but our oldest boys, did that. That may be COVID related and it being a great outlet and that type of thing. But it's not uncommon for those steel and titanium teams to begin one way and then expand and go much further. Our red and blue teams are year-round teams, so they'll start pretty much as soon as possible. June, certainly after the 4th of July, and they will go all the way right up into tryouts the next year. Josh, I'm going to throw this one to you. A parent asked about the criteria for placing a player on a specific team through the tryout process.
Yeah, great question. So we typically are looking at 4 basic components. It's technique, insight and understanding the game, personality, and athleticism, and in no particular order. When you're talking about a player, obviously every player is going to have different strengths and weaknesses within those 4 categories. And then we also are looking at positional need. So for example, if you're selecting a team and you had 6 goalkeepers show up, you obviously can't accommodate 6 keepers. So, and at the end of the day, it is competitive. The kids are fighting amongst each other for playing spots. So one thing that we make very clear is that at the end of the day, the selection process is up to every single individual coach. You won't find myself as a technical director or our directors of coaching selecting teams for coaches. So at the end of the day, it will be down to every coach to make that own personal selection based on the qualities that they feel that a player may or may not possess. But those are in the main, the 4 main categories that they're looking at.
Great, thanks. Still in the chat, Lauren asked, will you consider adding an additional team in a particular age group if there are enough qualified kids above and beyond what's currently listed on the coaches page of the website? Let me clarify that the coaches page, this is our prediction every year based upon what we know. We go through and work with the coaches to come up with a slate and see what's happening, but those predictions are adjustable. And for example, last year we did add teams. We added 2007 girls titanium team that we had not expected to form, but there was adequate player interest and quality. And so we will expand, and potentially even there are times when a team may not form. What we're looking at, and I invite Josh to add to this, but what we're looking for carefully is to not, work to add teams or force a bad solution where one doesn't fit. We're looking to create the appropriate challenge for players for their development and finding a way to position them for success. And so that takes a lot of careful planning. The coaches work together in groups to think about it, how best to do that, so that all the players that deserve a spot can find a spot. Josh, you want to add to that?
Yeah, Evan spoke to that honestly. So, but at the end of the day, it's a question of quality and quantity. And it is important to us that we're fielding teams with as much parity as possible and that are competitive. So as Evan acknowledged, there have been many a year where we've added teams when we felt we could tick those 2 boxes, quality and quantity.
Josh, you want to repeat the 4 categories again on the tryouts?
Yeah,
The chat.
yeah, sure. They're pretty basic stuff, and to be honest, it doesn't matter what sport you're looking at, but it's technical ability, insight and understanding the game, personality, and athleticism. And as you can all imagine, within those 4 categories, there's a lot of other things that can be broken down, but those are the 4 basic categories.
Okay, and clarification on the fees chart. Someone has gone obviously to the website and started to dig through it and look at it carefully. The fees chart is the collection. It's not a prediction of exact costs, but it's our safe setup to sort of say this is what you can expect as sort of an upper end scenario, unless the team elects to do more, which is a mutual choice of all the members of the team to add to their budget. But the baseline of it, someone asked, say again? Aaron? No. So the fees chart sets out that there are fees at registration, and then there are fees that are collected over the year. And the steel and titanium teams, because they are laid out as partial year, they only do 5 of what would be 10 monthly collections. So you'll see the 2 levels for the 2 different teams. Because it's a $200 fee for 5 months, that's $1,000. You'll see that the collection for the steel and titanium is $1,000 less than the blue and red teams. And that's simply a mathematical equation of the blue and red teams are going all year. They have 10 collection months versus the 5 of the steel and titanium. If steel and titanium as a group elect to extend to the full year, then all that happens is those additional 5 payments become applicable to those teams. I hope that makes sense. This is a good question. And Josh, I hope he backs me up on here, because the moment I got on the board, I started beating the drum about female coaches. Yes, we have very few female coaches, but that's only over time. We've had several that have come to our club and done quite well and moved on. One left us this year because she advanced at Soccer Without Borders. She was a prior player of ours, and is a hot commodity, and Soccer Without Borders really wanted her to do more work. She's living in Oakland. So after several years of coaching with us, she decided that she was going to dedicate herself in that direction. Other female coaches that we've had have gone on to coach in college. We have one at UC Davis right now, and we're definitely not going to hold them back in terms of advancing their career and going on and doing those kind of things. The follow-up question about it is, what are you doing to recruit them? This is a difficult one, and we've looked at a variety of different solutions. One of the most promising is looking at our alumni crew. I would say at least 50%, which is rare when you look at the number of male coaches to female coaches in the landscape. But at least 50% of our assistant coaches this last time around were our female graduates. And we've talked to several of them about, well, are you going to be around? What are your career plans? You're going to be in college locally. And would you be willing to work with us in terms of actually stepping into the role of a head coach? We've got one in mind in particular who's quite promising. So it's a nuanced landscape in terms of outreach and what it takes to make a living as a coach in this area where, cost of living is not cheap. And we're doing a variety of things to sort of see if we can bolster that side of our club. Back to the chat, there were some questions about the difference between red versus blue, steel versus titanium. Again, that's the partial year teams versus the full year teams. We go into that in detail. If you missed the first part of it, this is being recorded. We will post it so people can come in and review all that information. Mark asks in the text, can you go into more detail on the selection percentage? I heard 1,000 to 1,300. Is that fairly evenly across gender, age? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Currently, we have about 1,000 players in the club. We have over 1,500 who are trying out. About 500 are from outside the club. And it's very close to 50-50 in terms of gender. And it's also pretty close to 50-50 in terms of the U14 and below and the U15 and above, sort of the high school ages. There's about 700, I think 750 players trying out right now. And then our U15 through U19 tryout in June. And so it's pretty even, across the board. Please correct me if I'm not answering your question correctly or I'm not reading it correctly. Josh, here's one that I can send your way. On selection process, are teams formed immediately after tryouts, or are players invited to a pool to then form teams?
That's varied from year to year, but in the main and more often than not, they are invited directly into teams. I think it is important to note that we do have the capacity to move players up. And we also do a great job as a club of, in terms of individual development pathway of identifying players that, for example, may be on a titanium team, but are doing exceptionally well, and therefore give them opportunities to train with the steel team in the age group. Whether that be just a handful of trainings, consistent trainings, or even pulling them up for games. And we do that across the board, both on the girls' side, the boys' side, and for all the age groups. This year, as you can imagine, was a bit more of a challenge given that we were confined to cohorts and kids weren't allowed to move from cohort to cohort. But in a normal year, we see a lot of player movement. So, again, what I would say is that more often than not, at the conclusion of tryouts, players are placed on teams, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to move within the year as well.
Back to the text, what is the volunteer commitment expected from parents? That's actually a really interesting question for Marin FC, because one of the things that we've concentrated on is life lessons for the players and player advocacy. So we rely on parents in many, many ways, but we've structured our referee and volunteer program to help transition from parent volunteers to kids getting more involved in that. So to answer the question about parents, we recruit managers and treasurers for every team. A lot of them, really enjoy doing it. They're at the games anyway, and so they'll repeat year after year and really get to know the processes and the systems and everything that's going on. So we have a really robust crew of people to do that, but we're always recruiting more people from the parent group as we go in. At the younger age groups, actually at all age groups, we collect what we call the RVP deposit, which is the referee and volunteer program deposit. At the youngest age groups, U12 and below, we collect $100. If the parent volunteers, because the kids are pretty young at this point, that deposit is entirely refunded. So at that point, we're looking for the volunteer component to make sure these young teams have new and robust leadership that will go with them over the course of time, and there's a full refund on that. We transition at the older age groups and ask less of the parents in terms of volunteering, and our referee and volunteer program turns our eyes towards the players, particularly in the form of refereeing. So they'll pay a deposit, and then they will earn a refund by reporting to the club that they've gone out and refereed. We also provide free licensure and a free first referee kit to all the kids who go through the program so that they can then go out and referee. This has multiple layers of benefit for the club, the community, the players. They become better players because when they know how to referee, they know a lot more about the game, a wider perspective in terms of them developing their knowledge and understanding of what they're doing. But it's also great because there's so much soccer in the area that we need referees. And so do other clubs. And so we ask that you just get active, go out and volunteer as a referee across the community, and that's how they'll go and earn their RVP deposit return or refund. Many of those kids really actually like it, and it's it actually pays well in terms of doing something outside that they like, and they'll go quite far with it. So we do rely on parents early on, and then we transition to the kids picking up and doing more in the soccer community as they grow. A question about the exact dates and times for the June tryouts. This is all dependent on field availability, and this has been very difficult for us this year in terms of COVID shutdowns and restrictions and what's available to us and not. Our field schedule is about 3, maybe 4 weeks out, so we are very close to locking in on exactly what those fields and dates will be. As in years past, the June tryouts will be very much like training sessions. Where the teams and players and new players will all gather, less so like a big jamboree on the weekends like we're doing now, and more weekday training session type setup and layout. This is a good question. Once a player has been offered a spot on a team, will they need to try out again in subsequent years? Yes. Every year the teams are rebuilt. This is a blank slate in terms of everybody has a fair shot in terms of their development and their commitment to the sport and how much they want to go for it. The coaches pay attention all year long to who's developing and where they're at. And tryouts specifically are that moment where we take a very strategized moment to say, this is where we will rebuild new rosters. And so everybody's involved and everybody has equal footing to come to tryouts and earn a spot on the team. Sorry, reading through this, a question about new players coming to the club and whether or not they're competing for spots that may be occupied by a current player. As I mentioned about tryouts, everybody is reset. So everybody trying out, yes, you're competing for spots, and yes, our players are returning, and they very much want spots too. So it's stiff competition, but it is not the kind of thing where a spot has to open up for someone to earn a spot on a team. Any player that we know or don't know coming in has an equal chance to earn a spot. And it's not a mathematical equation of how many kids graduate or how many people stop playing or leave the club, and then how much space is available for people to come in. It is much more a matter of every year having that completely recycled opportunity to look at the whole pool of players and assemble the best teams for challenge, training, and success. Actually, I'll throw, Josh, how about this one in the text? Have you ever had a returning Marin FC player not make a team? I'd only, kick that off by saying that we have I believe it's a 90 plus 93 to 94% return rate. So our players stay with us and we have a great time. But Josh?
Yeah, I was going to say that one actually is exceptionally nuanced. So if the question is, have you ever, well, we just as of a handful of years ago were U14 through U18 only, and we were 2 teams an age group. And it's only been in the last, going on 5 years now that we've gone all the way down to U8. We also, as you'll see, we have up to 4 teams in any one age group. But in some age groups, we only will have a blue team or a blue and a red team. So we do our level best to accommodate everybody. As Evan pointed out earlier, it is a meritocracy. So when we get to tryouts, returning players aren't promised a spot for the following year, that it has to be earned. And therefore, likewise, it gives every player that's coming in just an equal opportunity to make the team. So can I recall specifically a player that was a returning player and didn't make a team? I can't recall that off the top of my head, but I'm very sure that has happened because, again, we pride ourselves on meritocracy, and we do have a tryout process, and we do have new kids that come in every single year.
Okay, Josh, I've got one for you, but I'm going to give you a break for a second and jump to a question here. How many players typically in a U13 roster 11v11, and how many in a U12 roster 9v9? For people who may not be familiar, as the kids grow, the teams change in terms of how many players are on the field. So when we refer to 4v4 or 7v7 or 9v9 or 11v11, that's actual players during a game. Roster sizes will be larger than that in order to have robust training environments and have substitutes for games and injuries and that type of thing. It's not an easy answer, though, in terms of a mathematical what's sort of best. And the reason I say that is because if you look at, say, a U13 roster, you'll have 16, 18, 19 players, something in that range, potentially. But if you get to the U17, U18, U19 roster, where we have college recruiting conflicts and SAT conflicts and high school conflicts and injuries and that type of thing, the coaches are very aware that roster stability requires more players at the older ages to make sure the team is well positioned throughout the entire year. So although there are some standards and we look to sort of create the right sizes based upon what the field play will be like, it is a nuanced adjustment based upon the makeup of each team and what their age is like and what their schedule is going to be like. Josh, feel free to add to that. But a corollary to that is another question, which I'll throw your way, which is how do the coaches deal with welcoming new players into the mix when they may not have had the long history that some of the other players have had with the team?
Yes, I'll take that first one first. And as Evan was suggesting, I mean, again, first it comes down to a quality question. We don't add players for the sake of building a bigger roster. So on an 11 side, we strive to go no less than 16, but we can go up to as high as 20 in some cases, particularly for the oldest age groups. It could get even a little bit higher than that, though rarely does. And then for the 9 side, the ideal number is 13, though we certainly we'll go as high as 14 and as low as 12. But again, I go back to that first point, in that first we have to have the quality piece. So for example, if I'm building a team at an 11 side and we have 17 kids, and you're allowed to roster 18 on game day, but we feel there's a substantial drop off from players 17 to 18, then we'll stop at 17. So I hope that makes sense. And then with regards to how do coaches deal with welcoming new players that don't have a long history of the team, I mean, at the end of the day, we get paid to play with kids. So I like to think that as coaches, we're pretty good at finding ways to get kids to buy in, because at the end of the day, one of the most important things for us is the concept of team, and doing a lot of team building and team bonding exercises paramount, particularly at the start of any new season when you are incorporating new players. So there's a lot of different things that we do as coaches that are all tricks of the trade, but yeah, we're certainly keenly aware that new players will feel uncomfortable when they come in, and it's in the best interest of everybody, the coach included, to assimilate all the players and build a sense of team as quickly as possible.
Great. Rob, threw in a great question here. How do you balance team development with individual player development? What resources does Marin FC offer players that want to up their game beyond team practices? We mentioned the goalkeeper program. We also have a strength and conditioning and injury prevention program. These are all separate in terms of pulling them out of the team environment and giving them more to do. On our website, you'll also see that many of our coaches volunteer or step up to list themselves for private instruction. So there's a resource that's available there. But all that is sort of secondary to, I think, the biggest thing about Marin FC that sets it apart, which is that the coaches work in pods and teams, and they look at players in terms of where the team is, but also what might benefit a player. And the ability to guest play or move around or jump into another training is unique to Marin FC. You'll see a lot of clubs where teams tend to build walls around each individual team, and it's a very focused environment, team and wins first, that type of thing. Marin FC is different in that we open up the doors, and through player advocacy and coach initiative, we'll look at players and say, you know what, let's get you in to some games with the red team or the blue team, or let's get you over to some trainings where you can jump in and say, get a third training every week if your team, say a steel team, is doing 2 trainings a week. So that kind of flexibility, that kind of shoulders of the club really speaks to fielding teams for success, but also finding ways that the players individually can get more out of the larger environment between teams and between competitions. So Josh, not to steal your thunder, but I'm sure you might want to add to that.
Yeah, I was going to say that we do a myriad of things. I mean, number one, first and foremost, any team is the collection of individuals, right? So we are focused on the collective whole, but also the development of every single individual, both as a player and just as a person, which again, I spoke to earlier, but is exceptionally important to us as a club. And on top of that, we, in the individual development pathway, one of the things that we do is our coaches every year do evals for the players as a mid-year report. And we do that using a website where all the kids have access, and we're able to actually track all their evals that they've had from the time they were 10, 11 years old, which is the first time that we actually provide them written feedback, all the way to the time that they graduate. So they could actually go back, a player could go back and see all the evals that has been done for the player, and so too can the coaches, so we can see where their development is. But on top of that, we're constantly offering individual players individual feedback, both on how they can work within the framework of the team and specific things that they can work on a personal level. And in addition to that, we also provide them different technical elements to work on, including a juggling piece, because there's very few things that are objective in the game. So we'll actually give kids as homework juggling pieces. We'll do video analysis with kids. We'll send them YouTube clips to analyze. So we do a lot of different things, both for the collective whole and the individual.
Great. One more question here, I think, and we're kind of getting on the hour. Do all blue teams play ECNL? Do red teams play NorCal League? We talked about this a little bit early on, but I'll go over it again because it's pretty important. Our U13 to U19 blue teams all play ECNL. They are required. This is the league that we're committed to. They play league games around Northern California and against opponents as far away as Salt Lake City or Seattle. The red teams, and to a certain extent, whether they choose to or not, it's an elective thing for the blue teams. But the red teams on the girls' side currently play the ECRL, the Elite Clubs Regional League. And it's similar to the ECNL, except that it's more locally based in terms of the Northern California clubs for our girls. This is in development and being talked about on the boys' side. The boys' side in Northern California is a recent development. So that's in development. The blue teams, U13 through U19, are playing ECNL on the boys' side. And we hope very soon to see ECRL for the red teams. The calendar for each team is something to be discussed with the team. It's led by the coach. They may elect to play NPL in addition, or State Cup, or depending on other levels, that might be gold or something in NorCal Premier. But this is a mix based upon what the appropriate level for the team is and what the challenge level and the success level is likely to be. So I hope that covers that one. Josh, you want to clarify anything on that, or did I mess it up?
No, I think you messed that one up perfectly.
I messed it up perfectly. So I can see we're on the hour, and people are starting to say thank you in the chat. I'd like to sort of conclude the meeting by saying, I was you to all the people that are sort of tuning in. It wasn't too many years ago that my daughters were coming up through soccer and having a great time, and through a variety of clubs, and Marin FC was by far and away one of the best things that's happened to our family. And to give you an example, it's not always what you expect. Marin FC sets a great program. It establishes all the kind of support bases that you need for players to develop, but then it's also inventive and creative, which is something we encourage in our players. So the kids will head off and they'll go to the Dana Cup and the Gothia Cup in Scandinavia. Our team, for my youngest daughter, just sort of picked up and said, that's a lot of fun. We want to do more of that. And we packed our bags and went to Lisbon and then San Sebastian in northern Spain. And that team actually became the first American team of any kind to win the Iber Cup. Sorry. They went to the semifinals in the Dynasty Cup, but they won the Iber Cup. And this was just sort of the players having a wonderful time with their teammates at Marin FC and picking up and taking soccer to very, very distant places. And so this is an important thing about what a club can offer these kids. They may think that they're on a pro path or a college path, but what they're going to discover and what's brought to them in what's offered at Marin FC is really quite exciting. My daughter ended up falling in love with travel. She headed to NYU in their global program, went to London for her first year and tried out for the University of London soccer team and ended up playing there. Had no idea that would be the path that she would take, but it was Marin FC and the springboard that got her going. So I highly recommend it. It's been fantastic, and I hope people are as excited about it as we've been over the years. So with that, go to the website. Our contact information is there. You can reach out to us at any time. We'll try to be a little bit more available at the fields this weekend. And we still have those sessions on Saturday and Sunday. So do send any questions that haven't been answered tonight. And with that, I guess we'll call it a good night. Sound good, Josh?
Sounds great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.